Look, folks, I really don't like being a see I told you so. I mean, I know I do it a lot because it happens a lot. And I used to even have a little jingle with it. Nya, 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 see I told you so. Because it used to be somewhat unique. Now it's not difficult at all. It is important, however. I do, when relevant, like to remind you of things that you've heard in the past on this program that you may have forgotten, things that I've said. Here's a story that leads into my point. Washington Examiner, the headline, Kasich's Cave on Obamacare, shows how hard it is to beat big government. Ohio Governor John Kasich, who campaigned as a limited government Republican and used to be a big-time limited government Republican. When he was a member of the House 1994 freshman class, he presided over the budget committee that actually did balance the budget one time. Kasich has walked the walk as well as talked the talk. But here now is this story. Ohio Governor Kasich on Monday announced that he would implement one of the costliest, most expensive provisions of Obamacare by expanding Ohio's Medicaid program. His decision, which is a huge victory for the White House that'll provide cover for more Republicans to do the same, serves as a great case study on how difficult it is to impede the growth of government. When Obamacare was making its way through Congress in 2009 and 2010, the proposed expansion of Medicaid was one of its most controversial elements. As things stood, the program was crushing state budgets, so governors in both parties feared that expanding it to 15 million to 18 million beneficiaries, the so-called uninsured, would be unsustainable. Then Senator Ben Nelson was infamously given the Cornhusker kickback, expanded federal funding for Medicaid in Nebraska to help secure his vote, the 60th vote, to get Obamacare through the Senate. Now, there was a big backlash against the Cornhusker kickback. It cemented the idea in the public consciousness that the process used to pass Obamacare was corrupt. And as you recall, that helped elect Scott Brown to the Senate in Massachusetts. And that also added fuel to the Tea Party. And then ultimately, members of Congress substituted the special Medicaid treatment for Nebraska in favor of increased federal funding for all states instead. So under the law, the federal government will pay 100% of the cost of the Medicaid expansion at first, then 90% after 2020. This comes at a cost to federal taxpayers, $932 billion over 10 years. It's going to be more than that. So to be clear, that's if all states participate. But last year, 26 states, just to give you a little history on this to remind you, last year, 26 states, led by Florida, won a lawsuit challenging the federal government for coercing states into the Medicaid expansion. And the Supreme Court left states with the option of rejecting it. And that takes us back to Kasich. Now, again, to refresh your memory, remember Obamacare has a bunch of cuts. Medicare, $700 billion, Medicaid. And the way, see, they had to bring Obamacare in under $1 trillion. They didn't have to, but they wanted to, as a means of telling voters it wasn't going to cost anything. The Iraq War, remember these numbers? The Iraq War cost us $1 trillion. And so we're going to end the Iraq War and we're going to do health care. So it's a net wash in terms of money at present being spent. And no new money. This is what they said. But in order for them to be able to say that, with a wink and a nod, the number as scored by the CBO had to come in under $1 trillion. Well, the way this was achieved, in part, was the federal government, via Obamacare, makes the states pick up all these Medicaid expenses. All of it. That was the only way. Now, the states can't print money like the federal government can. They have to come up with the money. They have to raise taxes or try to borrow it or whatever. They can't print money like the federal government can. And this was a huge expense that Obamacare just shoveled right through their front door So we get to the Supreme Court decision on Obamacare, and the court said that states cannot be compelled to incur this Medicaid expense. They can opt out if they want to. So a lot of states decided to opt out. Kasich has decided to opt in, but he's not the first. There are 5 of them now. Governors of Ohio, New Mexico, North Dakota, Arizona, Nevada have all, the word is cave in the story, so that's what I'll use. They've all caved and said they will cover the expenses of Medicaid. They'll take over the expense from the federal government, in effect, which helps Obama in terms of the paperwork, keeping the so-called costs of Obamacare artificially lower than what they really are. Now, this is a disappointing situation to a lot of people, but there is a practical political reality to explain it, which doesn't make it easier to swallow, but there is a political reality. We lost the election. We lost the state of Ohio, and Kasich is up for re-election, and he wants to win. And he is simply judging where the people of his state are. And I think this is happening in a number of other places. The 2012 election is going to prove to be the most devastating election result in ways that we haven't even contemplated yet. But every week there is new evidence of this. The "see, I told you so" is not specifically that governors like this were going to cave, but that resistance to Obama was going to become practically nil. There isn't any resistance to Obama anywhere. And it's going to get worse even from this point. There's no political impetus. There's no perceived upside on the part of Republicans for standing in the way of Obama. The perception is that the people of this country love Obama. I mean, cult figure love this guy. This is the perception in the Republican Party, and that there's nothing that's going to change that. And so they have to bite the bullet, gnash their teeth, and go along with all this so as not to be hated. It is a purely defensive posture, but it's also a concession to what they believe the political realities today are. And that's our wrong button. This election result is causing a mindset in the Republican Party that is as devastating. This is worse than the mindset and the realities after Watergate. And it's not just because the Republicans thought they were going to win. It's not just because they thought Romney was going to win. It is because of who Obama is and what his policies are, and the perception that the American people massively support it all. And that's why Cantor is saying we're going to have to do a better job of explaining who we are. We need to do a better job explaining why we're doing what we're doing. I think, that epitomizes how lost they all feel. And right now, folks, there is no fight. There's no desire for it. There's no fight mentality. There is no desire for any opposition of any kind at this point in time. That's what all of this means. It's a direct outcome of the 2012 election. It is Santa Claus trumping freedom. Santa Claus trumping everything. Santa Claus beats fiscal responsibility. Santa Claus beats individual liberty. Santa Claus beats individual responsibility. Santa Claus trumps all of this. It's no more complicated than that, but that's exactly what all of this means. Santa Claus trumps everything. Santa Claus trumps working. Everybody loves Santa Claus. That bugs them. They think there's nothing in it. There's no upside to opposing anything that's happening in the country right now. And it's going to get even worse as issues come up and more Republicans throw in the towel. That is going to happen. And I have no idea what's going to arrest it. At some point, it'll stop, and somebody's going to reverse it. So I don't know what it's going to be, when. I haven't the slightest idea. But Kasich's up for re-election. He lost. The state of Ohio went Obama. It went Democrat. He's reading tea leaves. Other governors are doing the same thing. There's some holdouts. I mean, it's not every Republican is throwing in the towel, but for the most part, the overarching philosophy right now is, or theory, there's nothing to be gained in opposing Obama. The media is going to come out and destroy you. The American people love Santa Claus and don't want to hear any opposition. That's just going to be categorized as mean-spiritedness, extremism, racism, what have you. So you have to bite the bullet for a while. Let this play out, because there's nothing that's going to stop this. Nothing foreseen that's going to stop it. Something will, but I don't know what or when, but something will arrest this, because it always happens.